Welcome to Peace Beat. My name is Doug Thompson. Tonight our guest is Cindy Sheehan. Cindy is an internationally known peace activist. She's been active around the world, especially in the United States. She's in Peoria on a special mission. She's actually riding a bike through Peoria, or has been riding a bike. And she's here to tell us about why she was on the bike, what she's doing here, and some of her future plans. We'll also go into some of Cindy's past history, and I think the show this hour will be very interesting. Cindy, welcome to Peoria, and tell us what brings you to Peoria. Why this bike riding?
Well, I am riding from California to Washington, D.C., and I'm on an action called Tour de Peace. And why am I bike riding? Well, I have, like you said, been all over this country many, many times, and I usually fly from West Coast to East Coast back to West Coast, and we get very jaded on the coast because we think that everybody in the country thinks the way we do, and they certainly don't. And so I've been a cycler for about 6 or 7 years now. I sold my car because I feel like the U.S.'s dependence on fossil fuels, and not just the military or the government, but our dependence on fossil fuels is harmful. And so I realized that one of the reasons my son was killed was for the U.S. corporation and really international control of Iraq's resources. And so I felt really bad about participating in the fossil fuel economy. So I sold my car, I've been cycling, and that's one of the demands of Tour de Peace, is to complete independence from fossil fuels, not just foreign fossil fuels, which the Democrats like to say, but all fossil fuels. I mean, here in the United States, we're fracking, offshore drilling, all kinds of harmful activities for these fossil fuels. And so that's one of our demands. And this man last night at our event's like, well, what can we do besides have oil? There's so many things that we can do besides use oil. It was kind of, to me, you know how they say there's no such thing as a dumb question? Well, I thought that was kind of contrary to that old adage. But it's been amazing because we've been biting this country, taking like 50-mile bites out of this country, moving inexorably from the West Coast to the East Coast. And so the slow pace of the tour has given us a greater opportunity to interact with people, not just people who come to the events that communities have arranged for us, but just people seeing our van and coming to talk to us, because I think many people feel the same way that we do, but they don't have a way to plug in to actions or help themselves educate about these issues. So it's been just, so far, we're almost 2 months into, and it's been absolutely wonderful. And Peoria wasn't on our original schedule, but Tanya reached out to us and urged us to come, and we were just going to be on Route 66 and some other cities that really we didn't have anything going on, so we were more than happy to come here, and we're really glad we did.
Great. You mentioned your son, and of course we'll go into this a little bit more later, but actually the focus then of your trip this time is more of an environmental type thing, not so much an anti-war protest.
Absolutely, no, that's not true. But of course these issues are really intimately linked together. One of our demands is, of course, to end all the wars, and it's about peace and justice. We feel that it's the war criminals who run the United States of America, whether they're in government or profiteers, should be held accountable. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people have been very disappointed that the Obama administration would persecute people like Bradley Manning and Palestinian rights activists, but protect the Bush administration, or they would persecute those kinds of people, but protect Monsanto.
Sure.
You know, so it's also about justice, and of course, the sitting president, whomever that person is, not going to look too deeply into the practices of his predecessor, because he wants the same professional courtesy from the next president.
Sure.
And so it has to be the people to hold these people accountable. I've been to Dallas many times since Bush left office, because we the people can't let them forget, and we can't let everybody forget, because that's what leads us into more and more wars. You know, we have these generational terrible wars, and between those wars, of course, there's all this covert activity, or Bosnia, things like Bosnia, Kosovo, Grenada, and things like that. So what we have to do is not let up. We have to keep reminding people, so the next generation could possibly not have to suffer the way we have.
I think, in fact, I went to your speech last night, and you mentioned there were like maybe 5 or 6 basic tenets you had, and one of them was end wars, and another one I found very interesting was end the suppression of whistleblowers. Talk a little bit about that, and Bradley Manning, and what...
Well, I think Bradley Manning is the most famous case since Obama's been president, and if Bradley Manning is guilty of what they're accusing him of, all he really did was, you know, show documentary proof of things that we know are happening in war. And so whistleblowers should feel, whether they're a whistleblower working in the private industry, or working in government, or working in the military, they should feel like they will be protected if they bring out things that their corporation or their institution is doing that are illegal and harmful. So there used to be whistleblower protections, and now all those are evaporating. We've had people who have, you know, CIA whistleblowers, FBI whistleblowers, corporate whistleblowers, who they see, to me, as like Bradley Manning's been in prison for years under terrible circumstances. He's going to be in prison for many more years, because I understand he's taking a plea deal, so he doesn't have to spend his entire life in prison. And the actual the people who committed these actual crimes that are being exposed, they have no kind of accountability, which to me is one of the backward things about our system.
Right. I want to mention here right at the start, and we'll repeat this a few times during the show, anybody that would like more information about you, about your tour, is there a website? Or?
Yes, our website is tourdepeace.org, TOURDEPeace.org. And then I have a podcast and blog at cindysheehansoapbox.com. And everything's all linked together.
Okay. And we'll repeat that later for somebody watching who maybe didn't get a chance to write it down, but we'll make sure by the end of the program you have that available. Getting back a little bit of your history, Cindy, this is not your first time out in the activist world, so to speak. You, I guess, first made headlines back, I think it was 2006 at Crawford, Texas. 2005. And, of course, that was at George W. Bush's ranch. Tell us how that all came about and some of your experiences there.
Well, I think that actually wasn't the first time I made headlines. In June 16th, just prior to Crawford, I was a witness in a hearing that Congressman John Conyers held, called the Downing Street Minutes hearings, and that was the Republicans gave us this little tiny room in the basement to hold the hearings. It was really packed with observers and media, and I testified because, you know, of course, the Downing Street Minutes proved that in July of 2002, and the invasion was in March of 2003, it proved that in July of 2002, the U.S. and Great Britain already had this policy of invading Iraq. And the Downing Street Minute said that they were going to fit the intelligence to for the policy. Sure. So their policy was to invade Iraq, so they had to cherry pick intelligence that would support that. So in 2002, months before the invasion and over a year and a half before my son was killed, it was already a foregone conclusion that we were going to invade Iraq. And so we testified. I was one of the witnesses. Ray McGovern, an ex-CIA agent, was one of the witnesses. Joe Wilson, who exposed their yellow cake uranium fraud on the mission to Niger, was one of their witnesses, and of course his wife is Valerie Plame, and a constitutional attorney. And so I felt at that point the sting of the right wing. Everybody from Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, I got on their radar at that point, and instead of having sympathy for me and my plight, they were attacking me. And so I wasn't surprised when I then went to Crawford. So how did that come about? It was August 3rd, and I was at home, and I had the news on, and George Bush was giving a press conference. He was already in Crawford. He started his vacation August 1st. And 12 Marines from an Ohio National Guard unit had been killed in Iraq that day. And George Bush said that somebody asked him about it in the media, and he said he didn't really say that much, but at the end I know exactly what he said. I'll never forget it. He goes, "The families of the fallen can rest assured that their loved ones died for a noble cause." And so I was waiting for somebody in the press corps to ask him, what's the noble cause? And of course nobody asked him. So I was typing this email to my list of people. It was about 300 or 400 people. And that's when we still emailed, directly to people. And I was typing and I was saying that 12 Marines died. It was scandalous and tragic and unnecessary. And George Bush said they died for a noble cause. Nobody in the press asked him what the noble cause was. And as I'm typing this idea gets in my head. I was going to Dallas the very next day, and it was a Veterans for Peace convention. And this is how I wasn't just like, I didn't just start that day in Crawford, Texas. The Veterans for Peace had invited me to be one of the keynote speakers. So they already knew who I was, and I started my activism on Mother's Day, just a month after Casey was killed, at Arlington West in Santa Barbara. I saw a report on that, and I told my husband at the time, Casey's father, I said, I'm going to go there for Mother's Day, and I met the Veterans for Peace. And so anyway, and this is like I'm typing, I'm going to Dallas tomorrow, and I don't even know where Crawford, Texas is in relation to Dallas, but when I'm finished at the convention, I'm going to drive there, wherever it is, and I'm going to get as close as I can to George Bush, or I'm going to demand a meeting with him and ask him what noble cause, because I have a voice. If nobody else is going to use their voice to ask that question, I'm going to use my voice. So that was Wednesday. Thursday I got to the VFP convention, and I'm sure the Veterans for Peace who are watching this all know Dave Klein, and he was president of the VFP then. He's since passed away from complications due to Agent Orange exposure when he was in Vietnam. And so Dave Klein I said I was going on Saturday, and that was August 6th, and Dave really tried to talk me out of that, because that was the VFP business meeting where they needed a quorum to decide the agenda for the next year. And he's like, Cindy, all the veterans are going to go with you, and they can't because we have this business meeting. And I was like, Dave, I've already put it out to the world that I'm going on Saturday, and I guess your veterans are adults and they can decide for themselves. And they came to the conclusion that they would send 12, like a squadron or something like that. 3 from VVAW, 3 from IVAW, 3 from Veterans for Peace. And so, but then a lot of people were just like, screw the business meeting, we're going with Cindy. And so anyway, it turns out that Crawford's only about 2.5 hours from Dallas. It's southwest of Dallas, and it's northeast of about the same amount of time, a little bit closer to Austin. But anyway, we drove down there on Saturday, and prior to that, Hadi Jawad from the Crawford Peace House was in Dallas, and we had a little meeting on Friday before we did the action. And Hadi goes, "Well, Cindy, what are you going to do if he doesn't meet with you tomorrow?" And I hadn't really thought about it. I said, "I guess I'll just sit in the road and say I'm not leaving till he meets with me." And Hadi said, "Wow, that's an action." And that really turned out to be an understatement, because he didn't meet with me. We had 7 people spending the night the first night, and it grew to, by Thursday of that same week, 700 people came to Crawford, and by the end of the summer we had at least 17,000 people who actually signed our guest book, I guess you would call it. Mm-hmm. And of course, tens of thousands of people around the world held solidarity events for us.
That's great. And actually, you had, again, I'm hitting just the high points of some of your activities later on at the State of the Union address.
Yes, that was in 2006. And I was in Washington, D.C. because we were giving the People's Response to the State of the Union, or the People's State of the Union. Mm-hmm. And we had a press conference in Washington, D.C., and I was there. Congressman John Conyers was there. Congress Representative Lynn, her name just flew out of Woolsey. She's a good friend. And Lynn said, "I have a ticket. Every congressperson gets 1 ticket. So they go, all the Congress reps and senators, and then they can bring a guest, right?" And so Lynn goes, "I have a ticket, I'm going to give it to you, and you can come." And the plan was that the people from the Progressive Caucus would stand up and acknowledge my presence, because they knew that George Bush wouldn't acknowledge my presence. So that was the plan. And I really didn't want to go. I didn't want to go and sit in a sea of Bush supporters by myself. And so I tried to give it away. You know, I tried to give my ticket to an Iraq vet that wanted to have it. And Lynn said, "No, it has to be you. We've already put out a press release that you're going to be there." And so I went there. I went through 3 different levels of security to get to my seat. They took everything away from me that I brought, my cell phone, paper, pencil. You had to go through 3 metal detectors. And I had a jacket on. It was January in Washington, D.C., so I had this heavy coat that I left in Barbara Lee's office because one of her staff members brought me over to the Capitol. So I had a heavy coat that I left there, but then I had a lighter coat underneath that. And so I was escorted down to my seat by a plainclothes police officer. And they, Secret Service is there, Capitol Hill Police were there, and this guy was Capitol Hill Police. And he escorted me down to my seat, and I went to take my jacket off. I was unzipping it, and there was a photographer right next to me. And I unzipped my jacket, and the man goes, "Oh, let me get a picture of your shirt." And my shirt said, 2,242 dead, how many more? And it was a VFP shirt. It was an Ann Wright shirt, as a matter of fact, a member of VFP, and a close friend of mine, Colonel Ann Wright. And so I was taking my jacket off, and the same guy who escorted me screams, "Protester!" And I was like, "What?" Where? Somebody else is here. Maybe I have someone I can sit by. And he comes and grabs me and drags me up the stairs. I'm like, what the heck? What did I do? And so they perp walked me out to the front and locked and chained me up to the wall of the Capitol Hill Police for hours and hours and hours. Then they transported me to Central Processing in Washington, D.C. So that was about 8-ish, I guess, and I didn't get out of jail till 1 o'clock in the morning. And I found out when I got out of jail that CNN was saying that I unfurled a banner, and they even showed a banner being unfurled. So I don't know where they got that footage. Fox News was saying that I was screaming obscenities at the president or whatever. And it hadn't even started yet. I literally was in my seat for like 5 seconds, and it was amazing because the photographer who was there, he's like, this is exactly what happened. I was sitting right there, and he put out a story, so all the other news outlets had to eat crow. And within a couple days, the Capitol Hill the commander had to resign and ended up winning a lawsuit against them for unlawful arrest because it's not against the law to wear a shirt with a message or have a button. It would, if I had been holding a sign or whatever, they consider that, even though I don't consider that, unless you're actually disrupting something, I don't consider that wrong. But so that's what happened that day. It was very upsetting to me because I'm sitting here chained to the wall, and my son was killed supposedly for freedom, and just sitting here, his mom was chained to the wall for wearing a shirt. And so I remember finally getting out of jail, and I didn't have a jacket on. It was freezing cold, and they were transporting me from place to place to place in the back of a squad car. I was freezing. The guy who was driving me was a veteran, so he was like making snide comments and stuff the whole time. And when I got out, one of the press was there, and he said, so Cindy, what were you in for? And I was like, I was wearing a shirt. And so that was like the moment of zen on the Daily Show. So me going, I was wearing a shirt, So that was like an interesting arrest.
Interesting. Somebody could call Obama a liar at the State of the Union address, and no problem. But that's very interesting. You mentioned your son, of course, a few times, and of course he was killed in Iraq. I think that maybe if we talked a little bit about that, what were your feelings about that when your son first joined the service? Were you pro-military? Have you changed totally, or just what was sort of? And your son's also, what were his beliefs when at the beginning?
Well, we were never pro-military or pro-war, and Casey joined in 2000 when he was 21 and had just completed all the requirements for associate's in arts degree, and he wanted to go on to college. And so at a career fair at his community college, a recruiter got a hold of him, and so he promised him that he could finish his college education while he was in the military. That never happened. He promised him that he could have a laptop. They'd give him a laptop so he could take online courses. That never happened. And the one thing that Casey said, Mom, don't worry, because the sergeant said that even if there is a war, I won't see combat because I scored so high on the ASVAB test. And I was like, well, Casey, I don't know about that, but I think everybody is in combat if there's a war, or potentially. And so, yeah, I mean, a little over a year after he enlisted, 9/11 happened, and well, before that, George Bush happened, and then 9/11 happened, and like I said last night, whatever happened that day, we know what happened that day. We can see the what happened, but whoever planned it, perpetrated it, or whatever, the U.S.'s response was totally inappropriate and overwhelming. So he didn't want to go to Iraq. He said the sooner I go, the sooner I'll be home. And he was there for just a few days before he was killed in combat. In combat, he was a Humvee mechanic, and he was forced to go on the mission that killed him.
Okay. I read a little bit about your history. I noticed that you were a youth minister for 8 years and also worked with at-risk children. Do you think, was this something that led to some of your activism? That you sort of had that type of personality, for lack of a better word, or is this something that really just sort of came about because of your son's death?
Well, what's funny is that after Camp Casey, a columnist from our hometown newspaper, the Vacaville Reporter, wrote this awful book about me, and she, supposedly interviewed all these people and whatever. And one of the lines is like, the Sheehan family pulled up stakes in Southern California and Los Angeles, and brought their radical ideas up to Vacaville. And one of the people that she supposedly interviewed, named Mary Ferrari, my best friend that I don't even know, she said Cindy Sheehan's best friend, Mary Ferrari, said that I tried to teach my the youth group kids about being a vegetarian, like this was like some high crime or misdemeanor. And so, I always had this. I was at my most impressionable during the Vietnam War, and I graduated from high school the year that they were pulling people off the embassy in Vietnam. So I was very, radicalized by those images and supportive of the anti-Vietnam movement, even though I was too young to participate. So yeah, I've always had these ideas. And when I was a youth minister, we social justice on the Catholic model, even though I'm not Catholic anymore and I'm not really anything anymore, is an important part of the formation of the religious education of young people. So we did all kinds of social justice projects, and even though I was adamantly opposed to the U.S.'s response to 9/11, I really didn't have any way of expressing that. I didn't know about it. I wasn't like on anybody's list to know. I didn't know that in San Francisco we would have protests until they were already over. So after my son was killed, and I got fired from my job for missing too much work, I was able to spend time trying to find other people who felt the same way that I did. So that's how I got plugged in to activism. Okay. And it's all about, it's not about my opposition to President Bush or my opposition to President Obama. It's about the effect that the policies of the country that I live in have on people around the world. And it's not just about wars. It's about environmental devastation. It's about economic oppression. And so when Casey was killed, I said that I'm never going to pay another penny in federal income taxes or income taxes at all. And at that point, I was ashamed that I ever paid a penny, because I've not only financed the murder and oppression of millions of people, if not billions of people around the world, I financed my own son's murder. So I think that's the model of ministry, is having compassion and love for the people who are disadvantaged and underrepresented, whether it's a high school kid in the Catholic Church or a sweatshop worker in Bangladesh, or residents of Pakistan or Yemen or Iraq or Afghanistan, too many countries to name.
Sure. I think that that's very well put. And we're going to take a break right now. When we come back, I'd like to maybe expand on some of those things, some of your views about maybe it's not just the war, but social issues that I know you have thoughts about. Anyway, we're about halfway through the program. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back with Cindy Sheehan in a few minutes. The parts of the peace movement. So to give you an idea of how much Cindy has done through the years. Cindy, you mentioned taxes, that you no longer pay federal taxes. Maybe elaborate on that a little bit. Why is that, and what do you hope to gain by doing that?
Well, like I said, when my son was killed, I felt that I had already, paid a huge price to this government. I don't pay my California taxes either because California sends troops and resources to these wars on terror, or wars of terror that our government is currently in. And to me, it's like, I explain to people, it would be like telling your own children, day after day that you are opposed to, for example, say you're opposed to them smoking crack. But then them coming up to you, one of your children coming up to you and saying, can I have some money to buy crack? And you're like, oh, okay. You open your purse and or your wallet and you hand them money. And so if I'm opposed to the things that the governments do, whether it's my state government or my federal government, then I'm not going to fund it. I'm not going to use my hard-earned resources to fund things that I'm opposed to. And people don't realize that everything we buy has so many taxes built into it, even if there's not sales tax. So people who are war tax resistors, we feel like we fund the things that we use. And I'm a big advocate of public libraries, and so whenever I can, I donate to my public library because they don't charge any fees. But usually parks, bridges, gas. When you buy gas, you're paying taxes to maintain the roads and things like that. So there's many ways of being a war tax resistor, from just withholding part of your tax, not withholding any, but sending a letter saying that you feel like you're paying under duress and you're in opposition to what the government is doing. And I just have done it 100%, and I don't even file. And people are so afraid of the IRS. They think they're some kind of horrible entity, and they should be. The IRS can really destroy people if they get it in their head to. But it took the IRS 8 years to find me, and I have a website. Everybody can find me. I have a Facebook page, and they finally got smart and started going to where I was going to be. And they tried to give me a subpoena, but they weren't smart with the timing because they didn't. So finally, they found my new address and delivered the subpoena but the magistrate who heard my case refused to compel me to comply with the IRS because he said that my response was civilized to something that was so uncivilized. And then when he said that, I knew that the IRS had lost that battle. And so I'm not against taxes. If the taxes went for health care, education, housing, exploring and advocating clean, renewable, sustainable forms of energy, I would gladly pay. And that's what I do. I said, not only do I not pay my taxes, I work literally my keister off trying to create a society where I would gladly pay my taxes.
Very good. You mentioned there your website, and that's one thing I want to make a point of mentioning a few times during the program. Tell us again what your website is, anybody that would like more information.
My website is cindysheehansoapbox.com, cindysheehansoapbox.com, and for the current action Tour de Peace, it's tourdepeace.org, like Tour de France, only we put peace instead of France.
No steroid.
.org if I said .com, but people just like go and Google. You know,
Yeah.
people are very sophisticated about getting information these days.
And I assume we normally don't raise money on this show, but if somebody wants to help out, you do have expenses that that would be an avenue people could
Yes.
absolutely support you
Right,
if they chose.
and we give the people the choice whether to donate, just straight donate, or, you know, we realize that some people do a lot of good with their resources, and we do have nonprofit sponsor if people want their donations to be tax deductible.
Okay, great. I wanted to bring attention to your shirt, 66. What's that
Very general
signify?
store. Well, when we were planning the tour and looking for a route, I live up in Northern California, and we started in Vacaville, which is close to Sacramento, and we could have gone just straight across, paralleling Interstate 80, and that would have meant that we would have to immediately climb a terrible mountain range at first. You know, we would, like, after 30 miles be heading straight up, and so that didn't really appeal to me. But also the weather. We left in April, so we would have hit some really horrible weather. So we decided to go down California and then cut across the country on Route 66. And it had a lot of appeal to me, being a historian, to be on a highway that has a lot of history and romance and, you know, things
Sure.
like that. And I was very young, but I remember that show, Route 66. And so so we planned on going from Route 66 from California to Chicago, where it either begins or ends, depending on, you know, where you started. We started in Santa Monica, California, which is a terminus or beginning of Route 66 on the western side. And so this shirt, it's from Hackberry, Arizona, and my first hill, really, really hard hill that I actually rode all the way up, I got to the top and there was this general store, and I bought this to reward myself. And so it's really almost like a Zen thing to be on a bike, and it's for the most part been just myself riding the bike, and we really thought that by now there'd be more excitement and more people joining us, because I mean, if 17,000 people can find Crawford, Texas, why can't a few more come out and ride their bikes with me? And so, you know, just like being able to get in connection with going slow and facing challenges like hills and overcoming them is like really a metaphor for life too. And it seems like my whole activism since my son has been killed has been like this steep uphill trajectory. And it seems like some days I'm up at climbing slowly and really struggling, and other times it feels like there is more help but then it feels like you go up 3 feet and then you go down, 1 foot. So that's kind of what it's been like, and it's been just very we're also Zen in the thing that we're planning on being in Washington, D.C. on July 3rd, but we're saying it's the journey, not the destination, that's important.
Sure.
Every community we go in is like what's happening in Peoria is way more important than what's happening in washed up D.C. So that's what this is about, and we're really getting to be like Route 66 is our best friend, and it's called the Mother Road, and I'm the Peace Mom, and so it's also it demonstrates how destructive the car culture is, because Route 66 was for decades one of the only ways to get from the east to the west or west to the east, and then they got the interstates, And if the interstates bypass the community, that community is a ghost town now.
Yeah. What's been your response along the way? Have you got more positive response in certain locales, certain area of the country? Has it been pretty much the same? Has it been mainly positive, a lot of negative? What would you say about that?
It's been mostly positive, but the one thing that surprised me was when we were on Route 66 somewhere in New Mexico, and the days are kind of, I have to like look at my journal and our website for the stops to kind of remember where we were. But we were somewhere in New Mexico, I know that for sure. And it was a part of Route 66 that wasn't a frontage road to I-40 or I-44 or I-55. And when it's a frontage road, it doesn't seem so cool. But when it's the part that goes off of the interstate, it's really amazing. And there's a lot less traffic, but for some reason the traffic that day on 66 where we were getting a lot of honks and thumbs up and peace signs. And that kind of surprised me, you know, being in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico and getting so much support.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. It's very energizing. Like when I don't want to mean to like interrupt you, but we're on the frontage roads, we often try to get truckers to give us a peace sign, and because we're so bored, it's like peace, and it's just very energizing when most of them give us a peace sign back or a wave. It's been very remarkable that way.
Yeah, fantastic. We were talking earlier about how your fortunes, so to speak, and by fortunes I mean the amount of people following you, have changed since the election of Barack Obama. Tell us your thoughts on that. Why is that you had more followers when George W. Bush was president as opposed to Barack Obama?
Well, actually, if you want to put it in fortunes, that started to change when the Democrats became the majority in the House of Representatives. We worked really hard because I was lied to, and I had Democrats like Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, these leading leaders of the party tell me, Cindy, if you help us, get a majority in Congress, we'll help you in the wars. And so I believed them, and we spent a lot of energy in 2006 on impeachment, because even though Nancy Pelosi promised me she'd help us in the wars, she also promised us that if she became Speaker of the House, impeachment was off the table. So we really spent a lot of time on that, and we spent a lot of time, and I feel like our movement and energy was used to bring disfavor on the Republicans, not so much, energy or support to the Democrats. And so they got elected. They took the control of the House of Representatives. So we're like, great, the wars are going to be over because Nancy Pelosi's not going to let war funding pass. One of the first things they did was approve the surge. And then that year, in May, they approved another supplemental war funding bill. And so I left the party. And that's when a lot of people started to, and Democrats or liberals started attacking me. But then I ran for Congress against Nancy Pelosi because she wouldn't put impeachment on the table. And I got a lot of support because there were Democrats who still could support Obama, but were angry at Nancy Pelosi for her not holding George Bush at all accountable. And so by the end of my campaign, I had about 180,000 people on our email list. We had one of those services that if people donate, they capture the email, or people could go to the website and sign up for the email. And so I could send out one email to 180,000 people just with one click. And I lost my congressional race, even though I came in second. We did really well. I got about 50,000 votes. But in 2009, after Obama was inaugurated, he was inaugurated on Tuesday. Friday was his first drone strike, authorized drone strike in Pakistan that killed 36 innocent people. So me being me, I sent an email to those 180,000 people saying, wow, it didn't take him very long to become a presidential war criminal. And so I can't even count how many people emailed me and said that, I'm bitter and angry and I need to give the president a chance. I was like, well, he didn't give those 36 people a chance, And so today, 5 years later, over 5 years later, I guess 4 years later, I have less than 2,000 people on my list. It's been an enormous struggle financially and in having resources, energy, and volunteers to organize around the anti-war issues since Obama's been president. I mean, it's easy to organize around wedge issues because wedge issues like abortion and gay marriage or marriage equality and what's another?
Single-payer healthcare.
Healthcare, well, not so much that because people realize that Obama has failed them on that,
Yeah.
but these immigration,
Sure.
these are the issues that people, it's easy to organize because you can demonstrate a difference between Democrats and Republicans. But if you are organizing around economic oppression, environmental devastation, and war and peace, there's no difference.
Right.
There's no difference. So it's been an enormous struggle since Obama's been president. It's been very frustrating. I'm not so frustrated about what he's doing because he's just following the policy of empire. He's another president and 44 presidents were able servants of this empire. I'm frustrated that there's not more opposition to what he's doing. Romney would be doing the same thing or McCain would be doing the same thing. The only difference was that it would be a lot easier to organize around these issues if they were president.
Right. I think you mentioned last night in your speech that they're both the war party. It's two wings of the war party, the Democratic.
The Democratic wing and the Republican wing of the war party, or the Bankers Party. My friend Gore Vidal, who we lost last year, used to call it the Bankers Party.
Yeah.
All the same.
Sure. Since we're talking politics, you mentioned you're running against Nancy Pelosi. You also ran for vice president.
Last year in 2012.
Yeah, with the very famous presidential candidate.
Roseanne Barr.
Yeah. So, and how'd that go?
Not the Green Party. I'm a member of the Peace and Freedom Party in California. I've been a member since 2009. And it's a revolutionary socialist party. And so Roseanne lost a Green nomination. And in the Peace and Freedom Party, we don't have primaries. We have a nominating convention. So even though we run candidates run for our ballot line in California, we choose our candidates at convention. So Roseanne put in a bid with me as her running mate to be the presidential candidate. And it was like a huge disappointment to me because I thought that running with Roseanne, we would be able to highlight and put these issues that I talked about, that the Democrats and Republicans are so close on, that we would be able to be that opposition. And since it was Roseanne, that we would get a lot of, a huge platform or soapbox for these issues. But I can't really speak for her, and I don't know why she even ran, because she didn't put any energy or resources into the campaign. So it was very disappointing to me. But I'm a member of the party. It's a great party. We have a great platform that I agree with 100%. And so we're in danger. We're an endangered species in California because California passed the top 2 primary law and changed the electoral makeup of California completely. So instead of, we used to be able to run candidates for any state office, and if we got 3% of the vote, we would remain an acknowledged political party through the Secretary of State. Now we have to have 100,000. It has to be a percentage of total registrants in California. So I think we have to have 100,000 to stay a viable, recognized political party, and we only have about 60,000. So in 2014, if we don't increase our registration by 30 or 40,000 people, we're going to not be a recognized political party. So I'm running for governor of California with the Peace and Freedom Party. And our goal, is it would be great if I could win, but our goal is to keep, these ideas of people before profit as a challenge to the corporate parties. And I'm very excited about my model in this is Hugo Chavez and his Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela. He was a friend of mine. I was able to go to Venezuela several times. I wrote a book about it called Revolution, a Love Story. And what the Hugo Chavez, of course, they rewrote the Venezuelan constitution, and they provided health care and dental care and education, food subsidies, and all these kinds of things to start a redistribution of the wealth in Venezuela, and was profoundly successful. But the one thing that he did that was the most valuable, not just to people of Venezuela, but to leftists everywhere, was that he convinced the people of Venezuela that they are the ones with the power. And here in the United States, we don't think that we have power. That's one of the reasons people are so apathetic, because they think that they can't change things, that even if they did become active, that nothing would change. And then people, of course, are afraid of their power, because if you are convinced you have it, then you have to do something. You can't be apathetic anymore. So that's what I want to tell the people of California, that if they are economically oppressed or struggling, it's not their fault. It's the fault of the system. And a good leader like Hugo Chavez of Venezuela provides a vision and gets people to buy into it, so they help him or her create a better society. So, and it might not be able to be done at a federal level in the United States right now, but if we could do it state by state or community by community, I think that it could really catch fire. And California used to be that way. When I graduated from high school, university was free for residents, and we had a good social safety net, and education all the way from elementary to university was free and accessible, and it was a good education. My kids act like I'm lying to them when I say, used to be able to ride a bus for free. Used to have music from 3rd grade all the way. We used to have art and drama, and not just the sports that brought in money, but sports for everybody. And driver's education, we took it as a class in school, and my kids was like, oh, and did you also walk to school barefoot in the snow? So it's not something that's impossible. It's very possible to do.
And you're running for governor in 2014,
yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, next year.
Okay.
As soon as I get off this ride, my party's been haranguing me about getting started, and I'm just like, leave me alone till I get home.
Okay. Okay, that's great. I wish you a lot of luck in that. That's very heartwarming that you'll give that a shot. And hopefully you do still have issues getting on the ballot, though, as far as getting the amount of signatures.
We'll have to get, I think now it's a very enormous amount of signatures, even if you belong to a recognized party. When I ran against Pelosi, we had to get a lot of signatures, but I was independent. So it was a percentage of all the registered voters. Now it's the same way in California for for everybody. And it's easy, of course, for the corporate parties to get on the ballot. It's harder for third parties to do.
Sure.
So who knows if I'll even get on the ballot. But I'm very optimistic because when I ran against Pelosi, I came in second. And this is what the top 2 primary does. The top 2 vote getters in the primary go on to the general election. So I'm very optimistic that I could beat the Republican
Sure.
that's going to run and be able to force the Democrat, who will probably be Jerry Brown because he's the incumbent, but he hasn't really announced one way or the other if he's going to seek re-election. I can't imagine he wouldn't. But it looks like Barack Obama was in our state, really promoting Kamala Harris because he said she was like the most good-looking attorney general of the state or whatever. But anyway, I can force him to debate me on these issues.
Sure.
And I can't imagine he wouldn't debate the person that's running against him in the general election.
And sort of like Upton Sinclair, who made a very strong run for governor. Epic.
His campaign was called Epic and Poverty
yes,
in California.
Yeah.
And so it's and as a historian and a California historian, that was my specialty in college. Is I'm very cognizant and grateful to Upton Sinclair for running that because that's my campaign. Hugo Chavez and Upton Sinclair are inspiring me for this.
Great. We've only got about a minute. Cindy, let us have your web address and any other information where people could get a hold of you if possible, if they would like to. CindySheehanSoapbox.com, and I do have a podcast that's been going on since January 2009, and we have all of the episodes archived there, and tourdepeace.org. And go look at the tour. You don't have to be on the entire tour. You can just come with us for all or the rest of it or part of it. And you can sort of get on your website and follow you along the way. Okay. And Facebook is a really good place, Tour de Peace or Cindy Sheehan Soapbox Facebook. And just real quickly, in about 30 seconds, you have a book coming out very soon, too. Yes, it's called I Left My Marbles in San Francisco, The Scandal of Federal Electoral Politics. Okay. And it's about my run against Pelosi and my recent run for vice president. Okay, and that all will probably be available or information? At my website. Yeah. Okay, great. And from here, then, you're headed to Chicago from Peoria, biking up there, and then to D.C. Yeah, we're going to have a big rally where Route 66 ends at Grant Park. And it's on Monday, so it's also a solidarity rally for Bradley Manning. Fantastic. Okay, our guest tonight has been Cindy Sheehan, an activist that I hope everybody now knows a lot more about. Hopefully you'll access that website and even know even more. Our camera person tonight has been Tanya Sneed. Good night.